Welcome to today's online session. And today's class, I'm going to talk about English Canadian theatre and drama and its evolution. So this is obviously from MEG 12, which is entitled A Survey Course in 20th Century Canadian Literature. So today I'm going to talk about Canadian theatre, and it is taken from Block 1, Unit 3. Okay, Unit 3. So we'll see how the Canadian theatre came into existence, and obviously what is revolution. Okay. Now, at the outset, let me talk about the history of Canadian theatre. So talking about the history of Canadian theatre, the history of Canadian theatre, okay, may be divided into three phases. Firstly, colonial, okay, during the phase of colonialism. Secondly, towards a Canadian theatrical identity, and thirdly, professional Canadian theatre. Okay, so that means that Canadian theatre has gone through these three phases. Okay, colonialism phase, Canadian theatrical identity phase, and finally professional Canadian theatre phase. And though there has been a theatrical activity in Canada, since the beginning, the professional theatre is very recent, and Canadian theatre, Canadian drama, therefore has no history, official history as such, you can say, before 1950s. That doesn't mean that Canada did not have its Canadian theatre existing before colonialism. And I don't think so. So even before the Europeans arrived in Canada, dramas were there, very much they were there. Okay, and they were performed by the local people who are known as the Inuit people, or even by many Indian cultures, okay, such as Ojibwas or Iroquois or the Plains Indians, etc. So it was they who used to perform the dramas, okay, perform the dramas. And we had people such as shamans, even the mystic people, okay, who were gifted enough, gifted enough actors. They were gifted actors who used to use masks and stage props, and also voice projections, including ventriloquism, to perform with great skill, and the spiritual plays and spirit dances, celebrating various kinds of festivities, okay, such as initiation ceremony, such as purification ceremony, death, even resurrection. So during these various kinds of festivals, various kinds of dramas were performed by shamans and mystics. Okay, and we have also ritualistic performances, okay, which were designed to benefit the community, okay, by influencing the weather, or by also curing illnesses, etc. So there is also, we see, apart from shamans and mystics, we also see that lay people also participated in these dramas. So there is a kind of a community, sense of community, which is emerging in the people, and the community also participated in these dramas, okay, which was played by shamans, okay, and the community people, they participated by singing songs, even chanting, even speaking known dialogues, okay. And at that time we had instances of the mystery plays being performed, the mystery play of the British Columbia, Quackitude, okay, Indians is perhaps the best known, okay, best known of this cycle, like the European mystery cycle plays. So in the 16th and 17th century, we had mystery plays, miracle plays being performed. So if you have read Shakespeare or Elizabethan dramas, you must have known that at that time, even during Renaissance period, we had this miracle plays, mystery plays, which were based on biblical narratives, and most of the themes were taken from Bibles, okay, Bible. And people used to perform, and people used to witness all those performances. So as far as the exact date for all these performances is concerned, there is no precise date, no exact date, okay, given to the performance of the first European play in Canada. So when you try to sort of find out, I mean, as to which exactly is the first European play which was performed in Canada, there is no, I mean, precise date for that as such. I mean, though these are in claimed, claims to the theatrical activities during the expeditions of Sir Humphrey Gilbert, okay, in 1583. So he came to Canada way back in 1583 in the 16th century. However, there is one book which is known as Le Théâtre de Neptune, okay, which was published in Paris in 1609. And Le Théâtre de Neptune, is considered to be the first play performed in North America. So you should be knowing that. So Le Théâtre de Neptune, I'm repeating the name. So this was performed in North America. This is the first play which was performed in North America. And as far as its form is concerned, it is a verse drama, okay, that was played by some 70 or 80 people, okay, particularly Frenchmen. So French people used to perform as Frenchmen, and even Macavan Indians and the officers of the colonial garrison. So apart from local people, apart from people, general people, there were officers also from the colonial garrison who used to participate in the performances of the plays. And the officers of the colonial garrison and fleet, they performed Sheridan's very well-known play, The School of Scandal, which was published in 1792. So they performed these also. These plays during the colonial period were important. So when we talk about the first phase deals with the colonial period, okay. So during the colonial period, what we find is that most of the plays were imported. They were imported from the mother country. So if colonizers came from England, so they imported few plays and dramas from England. If colonizers came from France, so they imported few plays from France. So these plays were imported from mother country during colonial period, I'm talking about, okay. And they played on, so though they were played on Canadian soil, but they did not deal with issues concerning Canadian people. So there was nothing Canadian about them, okay, because they were imported from the mother countries. And there is a person called Charles Mayer, a native Canadian, who in fact is said to be the first member of Canadian First Movement, where he sort of tried to take initiative in forming, establishing a Canadian theatre, okay. And he also sort of made a serious effort to Canadianize the theatre activity, okay, to instill a number of Canadian elements into it, and through his play, I mean, though his plays, most of the plays failed, later dramatists, after Charles Mayer, they took up his mission and started writing on Canadian themes, such as cultural and linguistic differences. Okay, they also talked about, you can say, differences between the England and French Canadians. They also try to bring out issues such as the rivalry taking place between the two cities of Montreal and Toronto. They also, I mean, talked about differences taking place between West Canada and East Canada. So I mean, they talk about various issues of Canada, and after this first Canadian movement started, okay, so we witnessed a lot of people writing about it. Now, having talked about this rise of Canadian theatre during colonial phase, let me talk about what happens to the colonial theatrical identity after that. So this is the second phase where we talk about Canadian theatrical identity. And Canadian drama, like Canadian identity, has generally been defined with reference either to the British or to the American drama. And what is the reason? Know it very well, because in the beginning, during the colonial period, most of the plays were imported from their mother tongue or mother countries. So that is why Canadian drama has been defined with reference to either British or American drama. While Sandwell, a well-known critic, he criticized the American domination of Canadian theatre. He did not plead for an independent Canadian drama. So at that time we had, you can, people like Standwell writing. So though he did not plead for, though he criticized American domination of Canadian theatre, he did not plead for independent Canadian drama. And what he wanted was that the British occupy the American space. So he sort of supported British people, British drama. Okay. The British actors, British dramatists, and other theatre personalities visiting Toronto and other Canadian cities, okay, they also stressed the need for British patronage of Canadian drama. So what we get out of it is that they were pro-British, dramas rather than pro-American dramas. So they wanted Britishers to come and bring their theatre, okay, bring their dramas, okay. And for Harold Terry, a British writer, American plays were a menace to imperial progress. So that is the reason. So he is giving his own point of view. Okay, Harold Terry is saying, he did not want American people to come there. The reason being that American plays were a kind of a menace, a threat to imperial progress, and Canadian drama was supposed to be tutelage of the British in this manner. So see a new kind of Canadian theatrical identity which is emerging and which is getting attached with British drama, okay, rather than American drama. So it is becoming British drama. So its identity, Canadian theatrical identity, is much more inclined towards British drama, and even ironically, the Canadian drama saw a ray of hope in the rise of radio or film industry, okay. And these competing forms of entertainment made the visiting American and British drama troupes financially unviable, okay, thus opening the way for the establishment of Canadian theatre. So it was not possible for Canadian people to always invite American people, the British and drama troupes, okay, there for the performance. It became very costly affair also. And since there was a rise of radio and film industries, so this also led to the decrease of the many you can say comings of the British and even American troops to Canada, and this gap was filled by local troops. So local people, they started performing the plays, they started performing various kinds of dramas, and inspired by the little theatre movements in Europe, their Canadian counterparts skewed commercial ideology. They started, you can say, propagating commercial ideology, expectations, and they dedicated themselves to the innovation and experimentation in Canadian theatre with priority to Canadian plays. So here we see Canadian dramas, Canadian plays, okay, emerging and sort of establishing their own identity, getting over, you can say, British dramas or American plays. Okay, so significant contribution goes to the rise of radio and film industries, and also the rise of local troops. Okay, they also contribute significantly, okay, to the rise of Canadian drama. Now, Arts and Letters Players of Toronto, that was a group, played a significant role in this movement, American movement, Canadian movement, okay. And so, Hard House Theatre, which was established at the University of Toronto, was opened in 1919. So this also, was kind of an official platform, okay, for the American people, for the Canadian people, where they could, perform their plays. And this theatre eventually became a place to nurture and even challenge, Canadian directors, designers, actors, and playwrights. However, Canadian professional theatre did not exist till 1950. Okay, so we have, the professional Canadian theatre being established in the 1950s. Okay, we'll talk about it later. Now, having talked about Canadian theatrical identity, now let me talk about Canadian professional theatre, which is the third phase of Canadian drama, okay, Canadian theatre, okay. Now, as far as the third and final phase of Canadian drama is concerned, this deals with the professional theatre, Canadian theatre, okay. It took off mainly, because of the role of a commission which was known as Massey Commission, okay. And Massey Commission played a very important role, and because of a centennial celebrations in 1967 also it played a very significant role. And in fact, the role of Massey Commission, if you talk about the role, with the growing pressure, on the English Canadian government to become, actively involved with the arts, letters, and the sciences, theatre and drama. Its Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister, whose name was Louis Saint Laurent, he established a royal commission in 1949, which was chaired by Vincent Massey. Okay, so that's how this commission was established. This commission was named after, this Vincent Massey. This commission was known as Massey Commission. Now, this Royal Commission's mandate was to encourage organizations in the field of arts, letters, and sciences, which really promoted or which expressed, national feelings, which promoted common understandings, and also added to the variety and richness of Canadian life, ritual, and urban life. So therefore, we see the role of Massey Commission in a very significant manner. It contributed significantly to the rise of professional Canadian theatre, in Canada. So after its establishment in 1949, it promoted national feelings, promoted a common understanding, promoted variety, richness of Canadian life, rural and urban life. So theatre got motivation through this. Okay. Now let me briefly talk also about 1967 centennial celebration, which was 100th celebration. Okay. In 1967, we find ourselves celebrating the 100th anniversary of real countries. So critics or some writers, they write that we find ourselves celebrating the 100th anniversary of real country, and this country, they talk about Canada, this country with money and attention lavished on national and festivities as never before. So we became aware of Canada as never before. So this is how they stated about the whole affair of centennial celebrations. And we watched the centennial year unfold, and what we saw was ourselves, for a little while, Canada was visible. So it was during, 1967, that they realized that after these centennial celebrations, we get to know about, Canadian identity. And they further also they say that we sort of were all changed by the vision. So they look at this celebration as a new vision, and it was a glimpse of subconscious Canada, a test of the excitement, energy, creativity that lay beneath the proverbial bland exterior and preview of the cultural and artistic ferment that was to follow. So that's why 1967 centennial celebration plays a very significant role in the rise of theatre, Canadian theatre, professional theatre. And during these centennial celebrations, there were a lot of promotions which were given to building a building of new theatres, and they were being funded by federal government. In fact, the central government, federal government of Canada, federal government of Council of Arts, and the subsidies were also given by federal government, to Canadian production. And the first professional Canadian drama, which was published, which was is known as Ecstasy of Rita Jo, which was written by George Raiga. And there we get to know about my critic writes about this, about Ecstasy of Rita Jo. He says, I would prefer the date, the emergence of the Canadian playwright from the appearance on November the 23rd, 1967 of George Raiga's The Ecstasy of Rita Jo. So it was, published and performed in 1967. And that was at the, centennial celebration. And he's looking at this, Ecstasy of Rita Jo as at Vancouver Playhouse. He says that it was a kind of a centennial gift for the people, centennial gift to the Canadian people. So this is how he is looking at the critic is looking at the play. So The play, which was entitled Ecstasy of Rita Joe, which was written by George Raga, is known as the first professional Canadian drama.